Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The rain drummed against the windows like a relentless symphony of heartbreak, but inside the penthouse, the silence was even louder. Emma stood motionless in the center of the grand living room, her fingers trembling as she clutched the hem of her coat. Across from her, Liam's face was a mask of cold detachment. His arms crossed, his eyes dark with suspicion. "Say it again," he said, his voice eerily calm. Emma's breath hitched. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times, but never in her worst nightmares had she imagined it unfolding like this. "I'm pregnant." The words felt heavy in the air, as if the very walls absorbed their weight. Liam didn't flinch, but the set of his jaw tightened. "And I suppose I'm supposed to believe this is good news?" His voice dripped with cynicism. "That you're carrying my child out of love, not convenience." Emma's eyes widened, her heart skipping a painful beat. "What are you saying?" He let out a humorless laugh, running a hand through his tousled hair. "Don't play dumb, Emma. We both know what this is. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Child. A perfect way to ensure you'll always have access to my wealth, my name." Shock and betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "Liam, you don't mean that." His stare was ice. "You expect me to believe that after everything?" Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "After everything," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Liam, I have never once asked you for money. I've never wanted anything from you except you." He scoffed. "Right. And I'm supposed to believe that you, some waitress I met by accident, just happened to fall in love with me, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises." He took a step forward, his gaze filled with contempt. "You're a liar, Emma." Emma shook her head, unable to comprehend how quickly the man she loved had turned into a stranger. She reached for him, but he pulled away as if her touch burned him. "Pack your things," he said coldly, "and leave." Her breath caught in her throat. "Liam, please." "There's nothing else to say," he cut her off. "I won't be manipulated. You made your move, but I won't be your fool." The finality in his tone shattered her. For a moment, she thought about fighting, about screaming that he was wrong, that his love for her should be enough proof. But she saw it in his eyes. He had already made up his mind. Slowly, she straightened her back, biting down the sob threatening to escape. "I never wanted anything from you, Liam," she whispered. "And now, you've given me no choice but to prove it." With that, she turned on her heel, her heart breaking with every step. And Liam let her go. Days turned into weeks. Weeks blurred into months. And yet, the memory of that night haunted Liam like a ghost that refused to be exorcised. At first, he convinced himself he was right. That she had been nothing more than a well-played deception. That he had dodged a bullet. But the silence in his penthouse told another story. He had been prepared for relief. For the satisfaction of avoiding a trap. Instead, he found himself drowning in the quiet. Everything reminded him of her. The way she used to hum while making coffee in the morning. The scent of vanilla that lingered in the air whenever she walked by. The way she curled into his side on cold nights, trusting him with a vulnerability he hadn't deserved. And worst of all, the gnawing feeling in his gut. The one that whispered that he had made a terrible mistake. Liam tried to move on. He focused on work, buried himself in projects, convinced himself that the emptiness was just temporary. But it wasn't. One evening, as he sat in his dimly lit office, his phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, someone who had once moved in the same elite circles as him. "Did you know Emma Kensington just gave birth? Thought you'd want to know. Interesting choice of hospital. Private, exclusive, and one of the most expensive in the country. Guess she landed on her feet." Liam's blood ran cold. Kensington. That name. That name didn't belong to a struggling waitress. It belonged to old money. Power. And suddenly, the past 7 months unraveled before his eyes. Emma wasn't struggling. She had never been after his money, because she had always had her own. And he had thrown her away. Liam didn't waste time. The next morning, He found himself standing in front of a pristine, high-security hospital, his palms slick with sweat. Every instinct told him he had no right to be here, that he had lost any claim the moment he doubted her. But he had to see her, had to see them. When he walked inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic filled his lungs. The receptionist barely glanced at him before directing him to the VIP maternity suite. The closer he got, the heavier his steps became. And then he saw her. Emma sat near the window, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. She looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in the way she held the tiny bundle in her arms. His child. His throat tightened. Emma looked up. For a moment there was no recognition. Then, something unreadable flickered across her face. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Liam swallowed, his pulse hammering in his ears. "I needed to see you." Her gaze was unreadable. "Why? So you can confirm that I'm doing just fine without you." The words hit like a knife, but he deserved it. "Emma," he took a cautious step forward. I didn't know." She let out a humorless laugh. "Didn't know what?" "That I wasn't some gold-digging nobody. That I didn't need your money." Liam felt like the walls were closing in on him. "I was an idiot." Emma met his gaze, her eyes sharper than he remembered. "Yes, you were." Silence stretched between them. Finally, she looked down at the baby in her arms. "Meet Oliver," she murmured. His heart clenched. "Oliver." Emma kissed the baby's forehead before looking back at him. "He doesn't know you. And he won't." Liam felt his world tilt. "Emma, please." But she shook her head. "You made your choice, Liam." And just like that he realized this wasn't just about regret. It was about consequences. And he had lost them both. Liam stood frozen, staring at the tiny baby cradled in Emma's arms. His son. His heart pounded in his chest, a dull, aching drumbeat of regret. He had imagined this moment differently, perhaps with relief, maybe even joy, but instead, all he felt was a suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. Emma's expression was unreadable, but her words cut deeper than any anger ever could. He had known she wouldn't welcome him with open arms. He had known this would be difficult, but he had hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would give him a chance to fix what he had broken. "Emma, please," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong." She didn't look up. Instead, she gently ran her fingers over the baby's soft cheek, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I spent months trying to understand how you could turn on me so quickly," she finally said. "How you could believe that I was capable of something so disgusting. And then I realized something." Liam swallowed hard. "What?" Emma lifted her gaze then, her eyes cold. "It wasn't about me, Liam. It was never about me. It was about you. About how you never truly believed you deserved love without conditions. That's why the first thing you assumed was that I had to be after something. You couldn't accept the idea that I could love you for you." Liam's breath hitched. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but the words died before they even formed. Because deep down he knew she was right. "I thought I was protecting myself," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, congratulations. You succeeded." Liam's hands clenched at his sides. "I don't want to be protected, Emma. I just want to make things right." She sighed, adjusting the baby slightly before standing up. Even in exhaustion, she was poised, graceful in a way that reminded him of who she truly was, who she had always been. "You can't." Liam flinched. "Please, just let me." "What, Liam?" Her voice was suddenly sharp, cutting through his words. "What do you want me to do? Forgive you? Pretend like the last 7 months didn't happen? Let you play father after you threw me out like garbage? I didn't know." "And what if I had been poor?" she interrupted, her eyes blazing. "What if I really was just a struggling waitress trying to get by? Would that have made me unworthy of being the mother of your child?" Liam's throat tightened. He hated this. Hated the person he had been. Emma shook her head. the fight in her eyes dimming into something more painful. "You hurt me in a way I can't explain. Not just because you accused me of something so ugly, but because you never even considered believing me." Liam took a step forward, desperate. "I'll do anything, Emma. Just, please let me be a part of his life." She studied him for a long moment, and for a second, he thought he saw something flicker in her gaze. But then she let out a breath and turned away. "You'll have to prove that you're worthy of being in it." Liam felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it wasn't a door slammed shut either. Emma gently placed Oliver in his bassinet, brushing a tender hand over his tiny body before looking back at Liam. "I don't trust you," she admitted. "And right now, I don't even like you." Liam's stomach twisted, but he remained silent. He deserved that. "But if you're serious, really serious, then prove it. Not with words. With actions." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. "I will." Emma studied him for another long moment before finally turning her back to him. "You should go." He hesitated, his feet rooted to the ground. But he knew when to push and when to walk away. For now, this was as much as she would give him. So he left, stepping out into the cold morning air, a new determination burning in his veins. He would fix this, no matter what it took. Liam spent the following days consumed by thoughts of Emma and Oliver. Sleep became an afterthought, and work, once his sanctuary, felt hollow. No amount of business success could erase the image of Emma holding their child. Her expression guarded, her words sharp with hurt. He had shattered something irreplaceable, and for the first time in his life, money and power couldn't fix it. But he refused to accept defeat. Emma had given him a challenge. Prove himself, and he would. Not with grand gestures, not with apologies she wouldn't believe, but with actions. The first step was learning about the life she had hidden from him. Liam had always assumed she was a simple waitress, but after that night at the hospital, he realized how little he had known. Emma Kensington wasn't just anyone. She was old money, the kind that didn't flaunt its wealth because it didn't need to. The Kensington name carried weight in elite circles, a dynasty that had quietly controlled industries behind the scenes for decades. He had been a fool. With a little digging, he uncovered the truth. Emma had walked away from her family's influence years ago, choosing to live on her own terms. She had never touched her trust fund, never used her name to get ahead. The woman he had accused of being after his wealth had, in reality, chosen a life of independence, refusing to let privilege define her. Liam felt sick. But knowing the truth wasn't enough. He needed to prove to Emma that he was more than his mistakes. So he started small. The first time he showed up at her apartment, she refused to let him in. He stood outside for half an hour before she finally opened the door just enough to glare at him. "What do you want?" she asked, arms crossed protectively over her chest. Liam held up the neatly packed bag in his hands. "Groceries." Emma's brow furrowed. "Excuse me. I figured you could use them." He shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Diapers, baby formula. A few things I read were important." She stared at him like he had grown a second head. "You think showing up with a grocery bag is going to change anything?" "No," he admitted. "But it's a start." Emma hesitated, her fingers tightening around the doorknob. Then, with a sigh, she took the bag from his hands and shut the door in his face. It wasn't much, but it wasn't a no either. So he kept coming back. He never pushed, never demanded. Instead, he offered what he could. Some days he brought baby supplies. Other days he sent meals, knowing she barely had time to cook. He researched parenting books, learned about newborn sleep cycles, and even, though it bruised his ego, attended a parenting class alone, just so he wouldn't be completely useless when it came to his own son. Emma didn't make it easy. She kept her walls high, her interactions with him brief. But slowly, the frost in her gaze began to thaw. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, after another quiet drop-off, Liam turned to leave when a soft voice stopped him. "Do you want to see him?" He turned back so fast he nearly stumbled. Emma stood in the doorway, looking exhausted but less guarded than before. "Yes," he said immediately, his heart pounding. She hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing him in for the first time. The apartment was cozy, nothing like the extravagant homes he was used to. It was warm, lived in, filled with little signs of a life he had missed. Tiny clothes folded neatly on the couch, a baby swing in the corner, a half-empty bottle on the coffee table. And in the crib near the window, bundled in soft blankets, was Oliver. Liam felt something shift inside him as he approached. The baby was so small, his tiny hands curled into fists, his chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber. He barely registered Emma's voice. "He looks like you." Liam swallowed hard. He reached out hesitantly, then stopped. "Can I?" Emma nodded. Carefully, he lifted Oliver into his arms. The baby barely stirred, his warmth seeping into Liam's skin. For the first time in months, everything else faded away. The noise, the guilt, the anger. It all dissolved in the presence of his son. "I missed so much," he murmured, his throat tight. Emma didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was softer than before. "That was your choice." Liam closed his eyes, guilt gnawing at him. "I know." A long silence stretched between them. Then Emma spoke again, so quietly he almost missed it. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Liam looked at her, his grip tightening on Oliver. "Then I'll spend as long as it takes proving that you can." She didn't answer, but she didn't push him away either. And for the first time, Liam felt hope. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.